I remembered being at home. It seemed like a typical night, nothing out of the ordinary. I fell asleep. Shortly after that, I heard screaming. I saw my dad standing there covered in blood. I called 911.
911, what's your emergency?
Someone stabbed my dad while we were sleeping or something.
Somebody what?
Someone stabbed my dad.
Stabbed?
Yeah.
Okay, hold on to the paramedics. Don't hang up.
We've got several stab victims in the house and several hysterical family members.
It was a whole family massacred. It was just gut-wrenching.
I was in disbelief.
These crimes are contained in this home. The attack was directed on this family. Why this family? I have my belief that this was done with great anger, great hatred. It's unconscionable. These are just two evil people who carried out something because they wanted to be together.
He loved her. What do you do for love? Some people do anything they can.
I wished them the same pain my family felt in their last moments.
July 21st, 2000, 3:30 a.m. Dispatchers in Los Angeles County field a terrifying call from the home of the Flores family.
911, what's the emergency? Hello. Someone was in my house and there's like my dad's on the floor and he's bleeding.
Monica Diaz made the first 911 call. She said she heard somebody breaking in and screaming, and she became scared and sequestered herself in the bathroom, and she was so scared she couldn't move.
Moments later, dispatch receives a second 911 call from 18-year-old Esperanza Flores.
Okay, what's the problem over at your house?
I don't know. I heard some screaming and my dad woke up and he was bleeding a lot.
Bleeding from where?
I think it was from his neck. I don't know. I just saw blood all over him.
All available law enforcement officers are immediately routed to the scene. When deputies arrive, they're met by Esperanza, 16-year-old Monica, and their sister, 18-year-old Laura, outside the residence.
151, Tom 2, can I have 2 additional units, code 3?
One or two make an entry into the residence. That's procedure. They would want to do what's called a protective sweep. Check and see if there's anybody else inside the house, or even potentially a suspect. The deputy makes a right-hand turn into a bedroom because the information was that there was a victim in that bedroom. He did a quick check, and that victim was Sylvia Jr. She was a 14-year-old young lady. The amount of injuries inflicted was so horrific. She suffered a terrible death. The deputy continued in a westward fashion and entered a room, and that's where 2 boys were at. Richard Flores Jr. and then Matthew. They were young, 17 and 10 years old. Richard Jr. was lying on the floor. Matthew, his body was lying, resting against his brother. He had suffered horrible lacerations. The deputy was shaken, visibly shaken. They did a sweep and found yet another victim. That ended up being the father, Richard Sr.
The children's mother, Sylvia Flores, is lying on the bed, bleeding, but she's still breathing.
The mother, the matriarch of the family, is in critical condition. Her injuries were quite severe. Puncture wounds to her upper torso area. It caused for a collapsed lung. There were slashes cut off the windpipe. Sylvia was treated and then transported to a local hospital.
After clearing the rest of the house, officers exit and secure the scene.
We had surviving members of the family, and that would be the eldest daughter of this Flores family, and her name was Esperanza, and adopted daughters, Laura and Monica.
We were standing in the front yard. There was just ambulance, police cars, the lights flashing. There was just so much that I was just trying to process. It was just overwhelming.
It was hard. It was hard to go through that, and it was hard to have images of family when they passed away.
I've already been on the job about 26 years at that time. Worked things to where I was exposed to a whole lot of death. Yet here, effectively, an entire family was wiped out. That was startling.
Pillars of their Pico Rivera community, Sylvia and Richard Flores were known for the large and close-knit family they had raised.
I grew up being raised not only by my parents, but my neighbors as well. My parents were very involved in the community. Our house was always like the central hub for everything. Me, my two brothers, and my sister were really close.
In 1987, the Flores family grew when Sylvia and Richard became the legal guardians of their nieces, Monica Diaz and Laura Retta.
Our mom struggled with drugs, to be honest with you. I was 5 when she passed away. Monica was 4. Cops took me and Monica away and gave us to my aunt Sylvia.
It did require an adjustment, going from a family of 6 to a family of 8. If you were there, you were part of the family. You were going to get taken care of. You're going to get treated like one of us.
Richard made me feel welcome in the home when we finally moved in, and made me feel like one of his kids.
There was never a dull moment in the house. There was always someone laughing, making fun of someone. There was just always the love.
SB, Richie, Sylvia, and Matt played sports. My dad enjoyed watching everybody play a sport. And I loved playing, and I loved watching him in the front of the stands cheering us on.
Playing basketball, I was decent, so I continued to play. And basketball was a pathway to go to college.
By July 2000, Sylvia and Richard's oldest daughter had finished her first year of college, and the family of 8 looked forward to spending the summer together.
I felt like we had the perfect family, the perfect everything.
But in the early morning hours of July 21st, 2000, the Flores family has been attacked in their home, and law enforcement have descended upon the chaotic scene.
The scene is well established as a crime scene. There's the yellow tape, there's police cars everywhere. There are neighbors that are up at this time standing outside of the yellow tape. The number one thing is we are there about getting the truth. First, I've talked with the surviving sisters, SB, Laura, and Monica.
With the sisters' help, investigators begin to build a timeline of the events that led up to the horrific attack.
The night before it happened, it was like normal dynamics at the house. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary. I would say probably like 10. I think I was the last one to go to sleep.
Around 3:30 in the morning, Monica said she got up to use the bathroom. And then while she's there, she hears all this noise, footsteps. And then she becomes scared. So she just stays in the bathroom.
Esperanza and Laura, they generally slept in the same room, in bunk beds.
Esperanza hears a thud against the wall.
I thought it was an earthquake, so I jumped out of bed, but then I realized someone hit the wall, like the wall connecting my parents' room and my room. And I ran outside into the hall. And when I did, I saw my dad just holding his neck, and there was just blood everywhere. And then I just remember being like, "Dad, what happened? Dad, what happened?" And that's when he got out the words, "I've been stabbed." And when I saw him fall, I guess I started yelling.
That's when Monica exited her hiding place in the bathroom and ran to Sylvia and Richard's bedroom.
She found her mother lying on the bed. She goes to assist her mother.
saw Monica over my mom, and she was applying pressure. She was trying to help her. So I was like, Monica, stay with my mom, stay with my mom. So I went to go look for the phone to call 911. And the dispatcher just kept asking me all these questions. And I was like, I can't do this. And I was like, he's bleeding. He was stabbed so bad you can see parts of his insides coming out. And when I knelt beside him, there was just so much blood. Literally, my knees were soaked in his blood. And I covered him with the towel, trying to stop some type of bleeding, but I knew he was gone.
I see my brother's room door closed, and I thought they were okay. I thought they were just scared from all the commotion that was going on. I go into my little sister's room, and I seen something brown on her bed. Didn't know what it was until I got closer. When I realized it was blood, dry blood, I started screaming out her name. She didn't respond to me.
Laura was in the hallway screaming. I was like, Laura, get out of here. Go outside, go wait outside for me.
I panicked and I ran outside of the house. That's when Espy and Monica followed me.
And the police were finally there, and they were like, is anyone here? I was like, I don't think so.
The girls insist that their family doesn't have any enemies. Instead, they believe the attack is the work of a random killer.
Everyone thought there was some type of serial killer on the loose hurting people. I think that was the last thought that my family had when they were killed.
If somebody would attack and kill this family, who else would they kill? Who else would they target?
Coming up, evidence inside the home points investigators toward a terrifying prospect.
The presence of duct tape made me go, okay, this is not a random event. This is a planned event.
And a forbidden romance sparks suspicion.
He gave her all this attention that she craved. She was head over heels.
No.
On July 21st, 2000, the Flores family is attacked in their Pico Rivera home, leaving 4 dead and Sylvia Flores Sr. clinging to life. Daughters Esperanza, Monica, and Laura were spared in the attack.
These crimes are contained in this home. The attack was directed on this family. Why this family?
While authorities scour the neighborhood for witnesses and suspects alike, investigators begin processing the Flores home for evidence.
By now it's past daybreak, sun is up. This is a large crime scene. Each bedroom was its own crime scene. You know, you just start working your way in. The front door opens up into a hallway. From this hallway, I'm able to see little Sylvia lying on the floor. She looks as though she slid off the bed or was pulled from the bed. She had terrible wounds to her body, her torso. She had a piece of duct tape that was affixed to her mouth. The presence of duct tape made me go, okay, this is not a random event. This is a planned event. I continued down the hallway to take a look into that room which contained the 2 boys. Again, I see the presence of duct tape affixed to the bed. Richard's on the floor. It immediately jumped out. This young man didn't even know it hit him. His throat was slashed brutally. It's my belief that Matthew more than likely was awakened during the course of this event. He obviously fought. His body was lying, resting against his brother. I'm standing over this young man to take a look at the wounds, the type of wounds, where they're located, all these things. And I remember catching myself because I didn't want my tears to fall in and commingle DNA on this young man. It made me angry and sad because of how violently he was brutalized. The stabbings, when you see multiple injuries to a body, it can support and give the belief that it was done with great rage. There was passion involved in this.
Investigators continue down the hallway to the master bedroom.
I believe Sylvia is attacked first because her movement and wrestling in the bed, by all accounts, causes Richard to get up. Richard Sr. had a number of puncture wounds, slashing wounds, defensive wounds to his body. It shows that he fought hard with his assailant. You gotta be in pretty good shape. I've handled over 300 homicides in my career, but there are those that are significant to me because of the gravity of it, the amount of death in one scene. As I'm walking down the hallway, there's a military-style flashlight, and it had a red lens on it. The red lens on there, it cuts down light signature. It's done in a military or tactical setting to where you don't want to have a blaring light.
So the attacker was able to see where he was going.
Based on what we were seeing, we had to think this was done tactically. This was methodical.
Investigators continue to the bathroom.
This is the bathroom that Monica said that she had hidden in or locked herself in. Seated on top of the vanity, I saw a double-edged knife. I saw another, it looked like a butterfly knife. This looked like evidence items to me. That made me go, hold a second. Take photos, let's go back there and interview them again.
In the kitchen, investigators discover the rear door is unlocked.
That family, routinely, all doors have been locked, yet that rear door was unlocked. A couple of steps down, a landing, I see a backpack. Within that backpack, what was prominent was this particular towel, a multicolored towel. I see pieces of duct tape stuck to the air conditioning unit that's outside there. There's scissors on there. Then, more compelling is lying on the ground, a hatchet, and a double-edged knife. They have a particular type of a handle wrap, black type of tape. And the reason I say that, because one of those knives I said in the bathroom had very similar wrapping, something handmade. We see these items in the bathroom, the tape connected to the tape outside. Either one well-thought-out individual is coming to wipe out this entire family, or there are multiple individuals involved in this. As investigators, you want to leave yourself open-minded about things, but no, this can't be a serial killer. The girl said, go get the people responsible for this, which we hear a lot, right? Go get them. A way of diverting us away from them. At this point in time, I'm looking at the survivors. Something in the back of my head is going, maybe one of these young ladies is involved.
Authorities in Pico Rivera, California are investigating the tragic murders of 42-year-old Richard Flores and his children, Richard Jr., Matthew, and Sylvia Jr. Investigators bring the surviving girls, Esperanza Flores, Monica Diaz, and Laura Retta, in for questioning.
Saturday afternoon, the girls were interviewed individually. What I'm looking for are the accounts consistent.
It was just so surreal sitting there and just trying to answer these questions and making me feel like I was part of it or had some type of knowledge on what happened.
I presented these photos and asked first SB, do these look like items from the house that you kept around? Are these items that you'd seen before? Esperanza provided that she did not. Laura quickly said, no, I've never seen any of that stuff. What are those knives doing there? Quite frankly, early on, there was something about Laura that gave me a little bit of pause. She's tough.
I think multiple people had said, look at Laura. She might be the person for this. And it was only because I was always in trouble. I was always doing my own thing in my own little world. But I could never hurt a human being. I was always very protective over my brothers and sisters.
I don't know, just something in the old gut went, explore this a little bit more. But that quickly subsided when I now talk with Monica. I said, take me through this again. She explained what she did again. She was in the bathroom. And then I put the picture out there and I said, do you know anything about these items here? She looked at it and went, oh, I think Michael gave me that knife.
Monica reveals she has been dating Michael Naranjo for the past year. Investigators begin to wonder if he could be involved in this crime. As they continue interviewing the three sisters, other officers dig into Michael's background and learn that he grew up in Pico Rivera, not far from the Flores family.
He had two older brothers, long since out of the house, and he just resided at the home with his mother, father, and himself.
I remember him being very just slim, clean-cut kid, very innocent.
He was a good student. He was quiet.
At 15, Michael joined the junior ROTC, where he rose to sergeant and dreamed of becoming a Marine.
Once he got exposed to the ROTC, I started noticing the changes in his clothes, aiming more towards the, military style. Michael started wearing black cargo pants and boots and had a bomber jacket as well.
Investigators learned that Monica joined the ROTC program a year later.
That's where Monica and Michael met, and it's where their relationship started. They were only in ROTC together 1 year, but it was significant enough to where their relationship progressed and became more involved.
He joined us everywhere. He had dinner with us. He went with us on family outings. He seemed like a normal couple.
Monica's sisters tell investigators that while their family was passionate about sports, Monica always cared more about academics.
She was a straight-A student, always in her books, always trying to figure out how to do things, chemistry, AP honor classes.
Monica wasn't the athlete that her sisters were.
There were some statements made that she was treated differently because she wasn't as athletically gifted. She was looked down on.
So when she met someone like Michael, who was devoted to her and gave her all this attention that she craved, she was head over heels.
Michael and Monica, once they were together, they became more withdrawn. It was one of those things where they were together often, a lot, constant, enough to where neighbors would mention that it was, quote, hot and heavy. And the parents didn't want him to spend as much time as he appeared to be starting to spend at the home.
Monica never had a problem with her grades. I think her grades started slipping when she did meet Michael. That's when Sylvia kind of had a feeling something was up when it came to Michael. I just didn't like him, period.
He had problems with the mother. Even calling her, she's a bitch. I was starting to think, this young man's involved in this. And if she's involved, Monica is involved in it.
With Esperanza, Laura, and Monica waiting in separate interview rooms, investigators decide they need to speak with Michael Naranjo immediately.
We had him come there. We asked him if he would consent to an interview. Absolutely. He sat down and we started talking with him. He sat effectively at attention to where I was going, you can relax, young man, it's okay. We just want to talk to you about what happened. And it was, sir, yes or no, sir.
Michael admits Monica's parents didn't approve of their relationship.
He was talking about the problems he was having with the parents, that the mother didn't like him. They were always watching them. And I just remember that during the course of this interview, I saw something. What happened to your arm? He goes, what? He goes, what happened? Is that a fresh cut? He peels it back and there's a laceration. So, well, what happened there? He goes, some guys at school were goofing around. They threw a glass bottle and broke and I got cut. My partner immediately goes, Michael, hold a second. That's not an injury received from somebody throwing a bottle at you. And he got a little flustered. My hope obviously was, well, maybe I can get some admission.
Michael continues to deny any involvement in the Flores murders, So investigators decide to collect fingerprints from him and Monica. While they wait for forensic results, Michael and the three sisters are free to leave.
On Monday, we start receiving the word that preliminary testing and processing of items that had been collected started producing results. The flashlight that I had talked about, fingerprints from the batteries inside of it. Michael.
A forensic examination of the duct tape ultimately confirms investigators' worst suspicions.
We have a roll of it outside. We have scissors there. We have pre-cut pieces that have been affixed for ready use. You just peel it off, ready to go. They all came from one single strand, consistent with the source item, the duct tape, and it also showed fingerprints. This piece was the one that was on Sylvia Jr. This piece comes from what was collected from the boy's bedroom. We had latent prints of two individuals, Michael and Monica.
3 days into their investigation, authorities in Pico Rivera, California, have connected 17-year-old Michael Naranjo and his girlfriend, 16-year-old Monica Diaz, to the brutal murders of Monica's family.
The forensic examination of evidence items revealed prints determined to be those of Monica and of Michael. The 27th of July was when the arrest warrants and subsequent search warrants were served at two different locations. Monica had been staying at her uncle's residence along with Laura and Espy.
A detective came to the door, rang the doorbell. They opened the door. As they're talking, there's cops on the side of the house walking towards the back to where Monica was. Then I'm seeing her walking towards the car, is when I realized that they were arresting her.
I was in disbelief. I couldn't believe a family member could do something like that.
I think we were all confused. Everybody couldn't believe that our own family took our family from us.
With Monica in tow, investigators race to Michael's house before he has time to learn of her arrest.
I go to Michael's house. I'm at the door, and it's answered by his mother. And I said, "Hi, we need to talk with Michael." And I took Michael outside. I said, "Michael, you're under arrest for the murders of the Flores family." And he just looked at me and went, just a nod. That was it. Handcuffed, put in the car for transportation to the station. We had set up a vehicle which was being recorded and put them in the seat together. Not an uncommon tactic that we use. And there was no wailing of, "No, we didn't do this. What are they doing?" Nothing you would expect from somebody that was innocent.
No. Love you, baby.
At the station, the suspects are placed in separate interview rooms. Investigators sit down with Michael first.
So you want an attorney?
Everybody said I should get one, so yes.
Okay, then I can't talk to you.
Okay.
Down the hall, investigators confront Monica.
You know who did this?
No, I don't.
You have no idea.
I don't.
How about Michael?
He hasn't said anything to me.
You think he did it?
I don't think so.
Do you love Michael?
So this,
Would you lie for him?
what I like to know, nobody.
I'm telling you that Michael killed your family. And you know what else I want to tell you? That you know he did. Tell us what happened. Was this supposed to happen?
Nothing was supposed to happen, though. That's the thing. Nothing was supposed to happen.
Your dad told people you've changed. He believes that Michael is the change.
My dad's been telling me that for a while.
And that scared you?
Yes.
What do you think happened? Why this happened?
I had lost control.
She wanted to try and mitigate her involvement in this. I just remember going, "Nope, it just doesn't add up." They're ultimately booked into the LA County system. They were both effectively juveniles at the time. He was 17, she was 16. So therefore, they go to a juvenile detention facility.
We just served a search warrant.
With Michael and Monica in custody, investigators execute a search warrant on Michael's home in order to gather incriminating evidence.
Quite a number of things that were consistent with some of the evidence items that had been collected from the crime scene location. Things like a particular type of cording that was used to wrap and make a particular type of a handle similar to the one that we had collected from the crime scene. There were books on torture, there were books on killing, there were books on how to kill, books on hand-to-hand combat. There was a military manual. It was all focused on someone trying to get schooled in the art of being a trained killer. He was an avid collector of knives. He had a large array of various types of knives that were in there. There was a notebook which had a listing of things, basically a checkoff list, showing the premeditation of this event. As I'm walking down the hallway, there's the hallway cabinet open. In that cabinet are these set of towels.
There was a hand towel that was found inside a backpack that matched a similar brand of hand towel that was at Michael's house.
It's the same towel, it's the same brand, everything.
Now, with a mountain of evidence against Michael, investigators wonder how big a role Monica played in the crime. They return to the Flores home in search of revelatory evidence.
That leads to the discovery of a box that was full of handwritten correspondence. Monica to Michael, Michael to Monica. I started reading and I saw the beginning of this relationship. You could read as it developed. Writings about their future together. They were going to be married together, and then became more, I guess you could use sinister. Monica talked about, I want to see blood. She's talking about killing, mass murders, and says, quote, I want to see the blood on their faces. I want to be a mass murderer. The best job is to kill people professionally. Imagine how many victims I'd have if I lived 800 years. Monica Diaz assisted Michael Naranjo in the planning and the completion of this event. Not only involved, but she, in my view, puts it in motion.
Based on their findings, investigators piece together a theory for what they believe occurred in the early morning hours of July 21st, 2000.
The evidence shows that Monica took a large role in helping to make this happen. She cut up strips of the duct tape to give to Michael so he'd have it ready to go when he put them over the victims' mouths.
She then unlocked the rear door and allowed him into the home.
She then went into the bathroom, obviously to make it seem as if she was just a scared young woman.
This was done with great anger, great hatred. It's unconscionable. These are just two evil people who carried out something because they wanted to be together. They're ultimately booked into the LA County system.
3 days after the murders, investigators receive optimistic news about Sylvia Flores.
And it's a miracle that she survived.
I remember my mom, really just my mom. I know there was other people there, but I don't remember them. And I kept telling my mom, my head hurts, my hair hurts, something's going on, but I had no clue. What happened? What happened? They still didn't tell me that Richard and the kids had passed. There's no way. And all I remember telling my mom, Monica did this.
Despite catastrophic injuries in the attempt to end her life, Sylvia Flores has pulled through after the attack that claimed the lives of her husband and 3 children.
I remember hearing SB scream. I remember being put in the ambulance. I know I died. I know I was no longer breathing. My heart wasn't beating. I know I passed. And I saw Richard, Matt, and Nina, and Richie Rich. It was a beautiful light, like they say. Perfect weather, perfect everything. And them telling me, no, you can't come with us. Go back with them. Go back with the girls. And they pointed. I looked back and there was SB and Laura. And I looked back to look at them. They were not there anymore.
Investigators visit Sylvia in the hospital, where she shares her memories of the attack on her family.
I woke up. I knew I was stabbed. I was having problems breathing, and I saw the blood on me. The bed was moving. I didn't know what was going on. And I saw somebody on top of Richard. Somebody was hurting him, and somehow he kind of pushed that person off. And remember the person falling on the dresser that was in front of my bed, and he took off. Richard got up. All I remember is telling him, I love you. He said something to me. For the life of me, I have no idea. Monica all of a sudden was there. And I says, go get a towel. So she went to the bathroom, got a towel, and I says, put pressure. Then I felt her hands reaching for my throat and applying a lot of pressure. I grabbed her arm. Her face was like she still has strength to hold her back. To this day, I know she wanted to kill me too. She was choking me. She was trying to finish me off. But I didn't let her. No. Not today. It's hard to say your child wanted to kill you. How can you hurt somebody like that? Somebody you love. I don't even know how to describe it. Honestly, I have no idea when I found out that Richard and the kids were killed. I was probably told several times, but I was in denial. I couldn't handle that information.
With Sylvia's testimony in tow, 1 week after the murders, the Los Angeles District Attorney announces that Monica Diaz and Michael Naranjo will be charged as adults.
They were charged with 4 counts of first-degree murder for each of the victims. And they were charged with a count of attempted murder for the attack on Sylvia.
In September 2003, jury selection for Michael's trial gets underway. But on September 30th, right before the trial is set to begin, Michael's lawyers contact the district attorney.
The night before, he surprised everybody by pleading guilty to everything. And in his plea, he basically admitted to doing it all by himself. He talked about always having these thoughts of killing. He just needed the right opportunity, and this was the opportunity that he had.
On October 22nd, Michael is sentenced to 5 consecutive life terms in prison.
When he was being told he's going to spend the rest of his life in jail, he just had no emotion. He was just very callous.
Monica Diaz's trial begins in late January 2004. When she takes the stand, she continues to assert her innocence.
She continued to defend herself by saying that she took no part in the murders.
Michael also takes the stand in Monica's defense.
He was, once again, the dutiful soldier who's, I'll take this all, I did this all, it's all me. She didn't do anything.
On the stand, he was asked why did he do it, and he said, I just wanted to kill someone. It's like, I liked them, I had nothing against them, I just wanted to kill someone.
Why would he do that? Just to save her? You both wanted to be killers. Why not say, we did it? No, she told him what to say.
He did this ultimately to try to save her from a lifetime of incarceration, but the jury never bought it. She was convicted on all counts, sentenced to consecutive life terms.
I think something happened in her mind. I know I raised a great woman. I don't know that murderer. Monica. Who that is, I have no idea.
I went to ask her multiple times, why did you do what you did? Maybe she was dead inside, I don't know.
They might have played off of each other and fed off of each other's characters, but it was all her. She is the mastermind of the murders.
He loved her. What do you do for love? Some people do anything they can. He made her feel that good, and she manipulated him into doing what she wanted.
I do not think justice was done. In all honesty, I wish them the same pain that my family felt in their last moments.
I love talking about Richard. I love talking about my kids. But no one brings them up. No one wants to say they were murdered.
Retelling the story is hard, but remembering.
It was a night like any other, the fog rolling off the Pacific, curling around the silent streets of Santa Clarita, California, in the spring of 1998. A faint glimmer of streetlight caught the glistening wet pavement, and somewhere distant, a dog barked, breaking the silence. But that quiet, that ordinary calm, would soon fracture into something unthinkable. On a narrow back road, behind a row of unremarkable suburban homes, a scream had pierced the darkness. A neighbor, peeking through the blinds, saw only shadows. By the time the authorities arrived, the scene was chillingly bare. No signs of struggle, no footprints except those of the first responders. And yet, the air felt heavy, as if it carried the residue of horror too raw to be seen. The victim, barely 18, had vanished without a trace. Her name was Emily Vargas. She had left for a late-night shift at the local diner and never returned. Her disappearance would haunt this town for decades. Police scoured the streets, flashlights cutting through the mist, engines casting red and blue reflections against brick walls and parked cars. Calls poured in from panicked neighbors. Friends described her as quiet but bright, the kind of girl whose laughter could fill a room without her even noticing. She had plans, ambitions that stretched beyond the small, sleepy town. But that night, none of it mattered. She had walked out of her life, and it seemed as though the world had swallowed her whole. Detectives treated the disappearance as high risk. They knew the first hours were crucial. Yet as minutes bled into hours, the trail went cold. The diner confirmed she never arrived. CCTV footage was scarce, grainy at best, nothing that could identify a person in motion. There were no witnesses, no ransom notes, nothing but emptiness where a life should have been. The investigation quickly turned into what would become a textbook case of frustration and despair. Detectives interviewed dozens of neighbors, classmates, coworkers, anyone who might have seen something. Rumors swirled, whispers of strange cars seen on her street, of shadows moving just out of reach. Yet nothing concrete surfaced. Emily's family clung to hope, a fragile thread that stretched thinner with each passing week. Flyers went up, press releases went out, and the local news covered the story relentlessly. each broadcast a reminder of the void left behind. The community was stunned, caught in a liminal space between disbelief and fear. Parents held their children tighter, friends looked over their shoulders, and the nights became long, anxious waits for a resolution that never came. By the end of the year, the case had grown cold, a textbook cold case. Leads fizzled, alibis fell apart, and suspects dissolved into shadows. Every investigative avenue seemed to end in a dead end. But even in the absence of answers, subtle clues lingered, unnoticed, waiting. A witness remembered a car parked oddly on the corner a block away from her home that night. Another swore they saw someone, an indistinct figure, near the back alley behind the diner. Small pieces, fragments of a puzzle, yet they were disregarded, considered unreliable, or simply forgotten in the chaos of the investigation. Emily's case entered the cold, a file on a shelf, the kind that seemed to gather dust and despair in equal measure. Years passed. The town tried to move on, but the echo of that night never left. Each anniversary, each passing season, brought a renewed grief, a shadow over ordinary life. The diner remained open, lights burning late into the night, a silent reminder of the girl who never walked through its doors. Detectives retired, passed the torch, but the case never truly ended. It lingered like smoke in the air, untraceable, insidious. Community events, birthday parties, even graduations were marked by the ghost of Emily Vargas, a missing girl whose story had no closure, whose life had been snatched away by an unknown hand. Then, in the early 2010s, science offered a glimmer. DNA technology, evolving at an astonishing rate, provided a new lens. Cold cases around the country were being reopened, solved through genetic material previously overlooked or unanalyzable. Emily's case, long considered a lost cause, was revisited. Detectives revisited the evidence. Tiny hairs found on her sweater, fibers from an unidentified source, traces of skin cells on the back door handle of her home. What had been dismissed as insignificant now held potential. Specialists extracted DNA with painstaking precision. The lab lights flickered on the equipment, casting sterile glows against the walls, illuminating the faces of investigators who had spent years wrestling with frustration. Every sequence, every genetic marker became a potential lead, a possibility to finally pierce the veil of decades-old silence. It was a long, grueling process. Every match led to dead ends. Every partial hit created more questions than answers. Yet persistence, that stubborn refusal to accept the impossible, drove the team forward. Interviews were conducted again, suspects reconsidered, timelines reconstructed. The town watched quietly, some skeptical, others desperate, all clinging to the hope that perhaps, finally, the truth would surface. Then came the breakthrough. A match, faint but undeniable. The DNA pointed to a man who had lived in the outskirts of the county at the time of Emily's disappearance. A man with a seemingly unremarkable life, no prior record, no known history of violence. The discovery sent shockwaves through the police department. Years of dead ends, of frustration, of cold nights staring at empty streets, culminated in this moment of clarity. The suspect, now in his 50s, had left behind a trail invisible to the human eye but undeniable to science. Arrest warrants were issued quietly at first. Then the operation was executed with a precision born of decades of experience. He was taken without incident, but the town erupted in disbelief when the news broke. A quiet man, a neighbor, someone who could have walked past anyone's doorstep without notice, was now at the center of a decades-old nightmare. The media descended, cameras flashing, reporters crowding streets, and the community was forced to confront a truth they had long buried. The man's history revealed a pattern of minor offenses, odd behaviors, inconsistencies in his stories, yet nothing that had previously suggested he could commit a crime of this magnitude. And yet, the evidence was irrefutable. DNA never lies, and science had spoken in the most undeniable terms. As the trial approached, memories resurfaced, small details that had been dismissed now took on new meaning. Friends recalled late-night calls, fleeting glimpses of strangers near familiar streets, and the eerie feeling of being watched. The town's collective anxiety surged as they pieced together fragments of a nightmare, now made real. News headlines screamed across the internet and newspapers. Cold case solved. DNA breakthrough stuns town. Missing girls case cracked after 15 years. Community shaken as quiet man arrested for decades-old disappearance. Each headline a drumbeat in the collective heart of Santa Clarita, a rhythm of shock and sorrow. But even in the wake of justice, the story did not end. Emily's family, while relieved to finally have answers, grappled with a complex mix of closure and grief renewed. The streets she once walked seemed different, yet haunted. The diner, still in operation, held a memorial, candles flickering in memory of a life interrupted. And the town itself, forever changed, carried a lingering sense of unease. The cold case had been solved, yes, but the emotional aftermath, the fear, the uncertainty, the collective trauma, remained. Every whisper of the wind, every shadow in a back alley, carried echoes of that night in 1998, a chilling reminder that evil can hide in plain sight, and sometimes the past refuses to stay buried. Detectives who had worked the case for decades found themselves both vindicated and unsettled. The breakthrough was monumental, a testament to science and persistence, yet highlighted the fragility of perception and the blind spots that can allow tragedy to flourish. The community, now aware of the darkness that had lurked for years, struggled to reconcile the ordinary with the horrific. How could a neighbor, a man indistinguishable from anyone else, commit such a crime and leave so little trace? The question lingered like a shadow over every household, a reminder that vigilance, awareness, and perhaps a touch of skepticism are the only defenses against the unexpected. Even as the man awaited trial, the story of Emily Vargas became a cautionary tale, cited in law enforcement seminars, cold case workshops, and criminal psychology courses. Her disappearance, initially dismissed as a local tragedy, evolved into a national narrative about perseverance, technology, and the unexpected ways in which truth can surface. Yet for the town, the experience was visceral. Children who had grown up in the neighborhood, now adults, recounted memories of the missing girl with a shiver, the unknown man with a lingering dread. The case, though resolved, became part of the town's identity, an invisible scar on the community's collective consciousness, a reminder that life can change in an instant, and sometimes the darkness waits patiently, unseen, for the right moment to be revealed. And so, the story of Emily Vargas stands as both a resolution and a haunting. A cold case, once a mere number in a dusty file, transformed by science into a tangible truth, yet leaving an indelible mark on everyone who encountered it. The town sleeps a little less easily, eyes flicking to shadows, minds racing through possibilities. The streets are the same. The fog still rolls in from the ocean. The diner lights still glow late at night. But beneath the surface, beneath the ordinary, the memory of that night, and the slow, meticulous uncovering of justice continues to resonate, a chilling echo that will never fade. The town of Santa Clarita had long thought the night of Emily Vargas's disappearance was a wound that time might dull, if not erase entirely. But the DNA breakthrough had ripped the scab off the old wound, exposing raw nerves, memories, and unanswered questions. In the early days following the arrest, police precincts were flooded with tips, some credible, many fanciful, as neighbors and strangers alike felt compelled to contribute to the narrative. Detectives pored over stacks of reports, rereading every statement from the past 15 years, comparing them against the newfound evidence. It was as though the entire timeline of Emily's last hours had to be reconstructed from the fragments of memory, the whispered sightings, the overlooked details that now took on sinister weight. Emily's home, once a sanctuary of teenage innocence and family warmth, became a focal point of investigation anew. Crime scene photos from 1998 were dusted off, revisited under the harsh light of modern forensic scrutiny. Tiny fibers, faint fingerprints, a smudge on the doorknob. Items previously considered mundane now held profound significance. Analysts worked in sterile labs, gloves tapping on keyboards, eyes scanning monitors for anomalies invisible to the human eye. DNA sequences were cross-referenced against national databases. Partial matches expanded through familial connections, a network of genetic breadcrumbs pointing towards someone who had been hiding in plain sight. The meticulous work was painstaking, slow, yet electrifying. For the first time in years, hope mingled with dread. The man arrested, whose identity was now public, presented a facade of calm detachment. Yet beneath the veneer, subtle signs betrayed the weight of his own awareness. In interviews, he answered questions with precise neutrality, avoiding eye contact, lips pressed thin. Investigators described him as eerily composed, as if he had rehearsed the persona of an ordinary citizen to mask something extraordinary and terrible. And perhaps he had. Behind his unremarkable exterior lay a life meticulously curated, a camouflage of normalcy that had allowed him to move unnoticed, even as suspicion swirled invisibly around him. Neighbors recalled moments of discomfort in retrospect. A door left slightly ajar, an odd smile, the feeling of being watched. But at the time, no one had connected the dots. Memory is a fragile thing, pliable under pressure, yet when paired with evidence, even the faintest recollections can illuminate the darkest corners. News outlets descended like a storm. Cameras crowded streets, journalists clamored for statements, and the town's once private grief became a public spectacle. Headlines blared across television screens and social media feeds. 15-year-old cold case solved. DNA breakthrough stuns community. The quiet neighbor. Decades-old mystery finally cracked. Emily Vargas's disappearance. Truth revealed after 17 years. Each story carried images of flashing police lights, the suburban streets frozen in time, and the faces of a town forced to confront the fragility of safety. For some, the revelation brought relief, a long-denied sense of justice. For others, it unleashed anxiety, the realization that someone so close could harbor darkness, the horror that the ordinary could mask the extraordinary. The investigation into the suspect's life revealed patterns that were both banal and chilling. Employment records, shopping receipts, mundane routines punctuated by subtle oddities, a fascination with abandoned properties, notes about local high schools, curious internet searches from the early web era. These traces painted a portrait of a man whose obsessions were quiet yet persistent, a presence both ordinary and sinister. Detectives wondered how many others might have crossed paths with him unnoticed, how many near misses had escaped memory. The terror of the unknown lingered like smoke, insidious, filling corners, seeping into conversations, twisting the familiar into something suspect. As the legal process unfolded, the narrative of the cold case shifted from speculation to forensic certainty. DNA evidence was presented in court, sequences displayed as strings of letters and numbers on monitors, incomprehensible to the layperson, yet indisputable in their implication. Prosecutors spoke in clipped, precise terms, linking genetic material to locations, actions, and ultimately, to Emily Vargas's disappearance. Defense attorneys attempted to sow doubt, emphasizing the passage of time, the degradation of evidence, the fallibility of memory. Yet the science was damning. Jurors, the public, and even skeptics could not ignore the stark clarity with which modern forensics had reconstructed a past that had once seemed irretrievably lost. But beyond the courtroom, the community grappled with a different type of reckoning. Parents held their children tighter, mindful of how easily trust could be manipulated, how close danger could lurk beneath the guise of normalcy. High school students whispered among themselves, revisiting memories of Emily with a mixture of fear and morbid curiosity. Teachers, counselors, and local leaders were forced to confront uncomfortable questions about the spaces their children occupied, the people they encountered, and the assumptions they made about safety. The ripple effect of one cold case extended far beyond its initial crime, altering perceptions, behaviors, and a community's sense of invulnerability. Emily's family, at the center of this storm, experienced a maelstrom of emotions. Relief, finally, that someone would be held accountable. Anguish for a life irreversibly stolen. Confusion about the years that had passed and the moments that could never be recovered. They navigated media attention, legal procedures, and public curiosity while privately grappling with their own grief. Each memorial, each vigil, carried a dual purpose, honoring the memory of a daughter, a sister, a friend, while marking the boundary between the past and the tenuous hope of closure. The family story became emblematic of a universal truth. Justice delayed is agony, but when it arrives, it is both balm and reminder, a paradox that leaves lasting scars even as it restores some semblance of order. The investigation's ripple effects extended into law enforcement circles, too. Cold case units across the state and the nation studied the methods, the breakthroughs, and the timelines, integrating lessons learned into ongoing efforts to solve other decades-old mysteries. Emily's case became a touchstone, a reference point for how persistence, coupled with evolving technology, could bring clarity where once there was only darkness. Detectives spoke of the intangible skills required: intuition, patience, the willingness to revisit what was previously dismissed. It was as much about human resolve as it was about science, a collaboration across time, expertise, and meticulous attention to detail. Yet for all the breakthroughs, there remained unanswered questions. How had the man evaded detection for so long? How many subtle signals had been overlooked, discarded as inconsequential? And, most hauntingly, what had happened during those critical hours when Emily vanished? While DNA provided the link, it did not offer a narrative of the final moments, leaving a gap between proof and understanding. Investigators could reconstruct the pathways, establish timelines, and identify the suspect, yet the emotional truth, the lived horror, the terror of a young girl, remained inaccessible, a shadow beyond the reach of forensic reconstruction. The public's fascination was relentless. Online forums dissected every available detail, armchair detectives debated the minutiae, and journalists wrote feature pieces exploring both the science and the human dimension of the case. The story's combination of a long unresolved mystery and sudden revelation created a compelling narrative, one that balanced the thrill of discovery with the darkness of the crime itself. Each new revelation, each courtroom testimony, was a drumbeat in the ongoing symphony of tension that had defined Santa Clarita for decades. In neighborhoods where Emily once walked, residents now found themselves alert to every anomaly. A car parked too long on the curb, a stranger at a local store, the flicker of movement in the corner of the eye, all became imbued with potential menace. Safety, once assumed, now required conscious vigilance. The cognitive dissonance of knowing that danger had been hidden in plain sight, coupled with the relief of justice finally being served, created a complex emotional landscape. People oscillated between reassurance and suspicion, comforted by closure but haunted by the implications of what had occurred. Meanwhile, investigators continued to work through the minutiae of the case. Every witness statement was re-examined, every old tip revisited in light of the new evidence. Patterns emerged that had been invisible in 1998 but became apparent with the context provided by DNA confirmation. It was a reminder of how knowledge changes perception, how the lens of hindsight allows us to see the invisible, and how small details, once ignored, can ultimately unravel mysteries that seem permanent and unyielding. Emily Vargas's story also sparked a broader conversation about unsolved crimes, victim advocacy, and the importance of maintaining evidence long after a case goes cold. Advocacy groups cited her case as proof that persistence, public awareness, and scientific advancement could converge to solve even the most intractable cases. Law enforcement agencies examined policies on evidence preservation, timelines for reopening cold cases, and strategies for integrating new forensic technologies into long-standing investigations. The impact of one young woman's disappearance rippled outward, influencing policy, perception, and the methodology of criminal justice. As the town moved forward, life continued in a fragile balance between remembrance and progression. The streets remained familiar, yet forever marked by an event that had shattered innocence. The diner where Emily had worked reopened, now a place where patrons occasionally left small memorials, candles, flowers, and handwritten notes. Teachers incorporated discussions of safety, awareness, and civic responsibility into classrooms, using the case as a real-world lesson. And for residents, the memory of Emily Vargas served as both cautionary tale and testament to the power of perseverance, the inevitability of truth, and the unrelenting presence of the past, lurking beneath the surface of ordinary life, waiting to resurface when least expected. Even as the courtroom drama unfolded, the town of Santa Clarita seemed suspended in a state of collective tension, a city caught between the comfort of resolution and the haunting persistence of memory. Every corner, every lamppost, every quiet stretch of asphalt carried the weight of Emily Vargas's absence, now juxtaposed against the unsettling clarity of her case's closure. Residents walked past the diner where she had worked, each step accompanied by echoes of laughter never heard again, smiles that would never return, plans that would forever remain unfulfilled. The ordinary rhythms of suburban life persisted, but the atmosphere was irreversibly altered. Vigilance now coexisted with mourning, awareness with grief, and familiarity with suspicion. The suspect's life came under intense scrutiny. Neighbors, journalists, and law enforcement alike sought to reconstruct a picture of normalcy turned sinister. Social patterns, hobbies, and daily routines, once considered mundane, were dissected for anomalies. A trip to a hardware store became evidence of curiosity bordering on obsession. Long walks along neighborhood streets, previously unnoticed, were reinterpreted as reconnaissance. Internet searches, early and rudimentary, painted a portrait of fixation and quiet intent. Behavioral experts examined these traces, noting the subtle mechanisms by which the suspect concealed menace beneath layers of ordinary conduct. Their analyses revealed a duality that both fascinated and terrified, the ordinary and the malevolent, coexisting in a single human form, invisible until technology and perseverance illuminated it. Law enforcement officers who had labored over the case for years now faced the emotional weight of triumph and trauma intertwined. For decades, Emily's file had rested on dusty shelves, a collection of half-remembered tips, fragmentary evidence, and unfulfilled promises. Now, with DNA evidence confirming the suspect's guilt, the victory was both profound and unsettling. Detectives revisited the scene with new eyes, retracing the final known steps of Emily Vargas, reconstructing her path, and imagining the choices forced upon her by circumstance and by someone's deliberate actions. For every piece of evidence that confirmed truth, there lingered the intangible, the terror, the helplessness, the moments no one could recover. In these reflections, the procedural and the personal intersected, shaping the narrative into something simultaneously resolved and unresolved. The courtroom itself became a stage for more than just legal proceedings. It was a theater of collective catharsis. Jurors, investigators, family members, and townspeople all bore witness to the meticulous unfolding of facts, the revelation of hidden truths, and the slow, deliberate unveiling of a life interrupted. DNA sequences flashed on screens. Witness statements were read aloud. Timelines reconstructed, each moment carrying the weight of years of uncertainty. The suspect's composure, cold and controlled, contrasted sharply with the emotional intensity of those whose lives had been irrevocably altered. Every revelation was a shockwave, reverberating through the courtroom and spilling outward into the community, forcing all to reconcile the ordinary with the extraordinary, the known with the unknowable. Meanwhile, Santa Clarita's residents experienced a shift in perception. Streets became charged with memory. Familiar houses, parks, and alleys were no longer mere locations, but markers of a narrative now clarified yet eternally haunted. Conversations, once casual, carried an undercurrent of vigilance. Parents, reflecting on the years they had assumed safety as a given, now instructed their children in ways both practical and psychological, emphasizing awareness, intuition, and caution. Teens shared stories of fleeting encounters, minor oddities long forgotten, and moments that suddenly gained new significance under the lens of revelation. The community collectively re-examined their environment, a process both unsettling and necessary, as ordinary life became inseparable from extraordinary consequence. Emily's family navigated the paradox of closure and grief. Relief that justice would be served existed alongside the relentless ache of time lost. Each day brought media requests, interviews, and the logistical realities of legal proceedings. Each night returned them to quiet reflection, mourning a daughter, a sister, a young woman whose life had been interrupted in its prime. Support networks, both local and nationwide, offered comfort, validation, and understanding, framing their grief within a broader context of cold cases resolved and unresolved. The personal became public, and the public, in turn, was forced to confront the deeply human cost of unresolved crime. Journalists and documentarians seized upon the narrative's complexity, crafting stories that intertwined procedural rigor with human emotion. Features highlighted the painstaking work of law enforcement, the role of DNA technology in unlocking decades-old mysteries, and the broader implications for communities, policy, and public awareness. Podcasts reconstructed timelines. Interviews with experts provided insight into the psychology of perpetrators, and archival footage captured the evolution of both the investigation and the community's emotional landscape. Emily Vargas's disappearance, once a local tragedy, became a cautionary tale with national resonance, illustrating both the potential and limitations of science, memory, and human perception in the pursuit of justice. Law enforcement agencies beyond Santa Clarita scrutinized the case closely. Cold case units, forensic specialists, and detectives studied methods used to uncover the breakthrough, emphasizing lessons in evidence preservation, witness re-engagement, and the integration of genetic analysis with traditional investigative techniques. Emily Vargas's case became a template, demonstrating that persistence, attention to detail, and technological innovation could converge to illuminate truths long thought unattainable. For those tasked with solving the unsolvable, the case offered both instruction and inspiration, reinforcing the notion that no case is ever truly closed until every avenue has been exhaustively explored. The suspect's ordinary existence prior to arrest highlighted the subtle mechanisms by which danger can hide in plain sight. Normalcy itself became a camouflage. Weekly routines, friendly nods to neighbors, participation in community events, all behaviors that reassured those around him while concealing predatory intent. Retrospective analysis revealed a pattern of quiet observation, careful manipulation, and the strategic avoidance of attention. Experts noted that such duality is common among offenders, a reminder that evil often presents itself in forms both banal and deceptive. For the community, these revelations were a profound psychological shock, challenging assumptions about trust, safety, and the predictability of human behavior. Media coverage amplified both relief and unease. News anchors delivered updates with urgency. Online forums dissected timelines and evidence, and local stations provided live coverage of court proceedings. Residents found themselves grappling with dual narratives, one of closure, validation, and justice, the other of lingering fear, disbelief, and the unsettling knowledge that normal life had masked extraordinary danger. Each broadcast, article, and post reinforced the duality of resolution and trauma, creating an environment in which communal identity was simultaneously strengthened and shaken. Psychologists, criminologists, and sociologists weighed in, analyzing the interplay of community perception, individual behavior, and the long-term psychological effects of cold cases. Studies explored the impact of prolonged uncertainty on family members, the influence of unresolved crime on neighborhood dynamics, and the social mechanisms by which communities process trauma. Emily Vargas's case was repeatedly cited, both for its resolution through DNA and for the broader lessons about vigilance, memory, and the capacity for ordinary life to conceal extraordinary darkness. Within the courthouse, the trial progressed with methodical precision. Witnesses were called to recount their observations from years past. Law enforcement officials provided detailed explanations of forensic techniques, and the prosecution carefully constructed a narrative that bridged decades of uncertainty. Jurors listened intently, weighing evidence, timelines, and testimony, their deliberations underscoring the complexity of assigning certainty to events long hidden in shadows. Each day of proceedings reaffirmed both the challenges of resolving cold cases and the power of persistence, science, and careful documentation in achieving justice. Beyond the immediate legal process, the town's emotional landscape continued to evolve. Schools held discussions on safety, awareness, and personal responsibility. Residents organized community events to honor Emily's memory and to promote vigilance in public spaces. Conversations among neighbors now included reflection on the nature of trust, the potential for concealed malevolence, and the delicate balance between security and suspicion. The collective consciousness of Santa Clarita had been reshaped, blending relief at resolution with heightened awareness of vulnerability and the unpredictable presence of danger. Even after the trial, unanswered questions lingered. The precise sequence of Emily's final hours remained partly obscured, a gap filled only by speculation and forensic inference. Investigators could establish patterns, identify locations, and connect evidence. Yet the intimate experience of fear, disorientation, and uncertainty that Emily endured remained forever inaccessible. This void created a duality in the community's psyche, closure achieved in the legal sense, yet emotional and psychological closure only partially realized. Residents lived with the knowledge that, despite technological triumph, some aspects of tragedy remained beyond reach, existing as shadows within memory and imagination. Even as the courtroom lights dimmed each evening, the town of Santa Clarita remained under the lingering shadow of Emily Vargas's disappearance, now illuminated by the stark glare of forensic revelation. Streets once traversed with casual indifference now held a tense familiarity. Sidewalks, lawns, alleys, each corner was measured and remeasured against memory, speculation, and the knowledge that ordinary life had harbored extraordinary danger. Parents adjusted bedtime routines, youth navigated streets with heightened awareness, and even the elderly recalled small irregularities from decades past. An unfamiliar car, a fleeting figure, a glance that had felt wrong yet invisible at the time. The revelation of truth was a double-edged sword, delivering both relief and the persistent hum of unease. Law enforcement continued to dissect the minutiae of the case. Detectives retraced the suspect's known movements, overlaying old witness statements with new forensic data. Fiber evidence, tiny hairs, partial fingerprints. They were all examined anew, and each piece told a story previously unreadable. Technology allowed for a level of precision unimaginable in 1998, uncovering patterns, reconstructing interactions, and connecting dots once invisible. The work was painstaking, methodical, but electric in its implications. Every analysis, every correlation brought clarity to the shadowed spaces of Emily's last hours. Investigators felt both triumph and exhaustion. The satisfaction of progress was inseparable from the weight of decades-long vigilance. Emily's family faced a delicate balance of public scrutiny and private grief. Media outlets descended upon their lives, cameras capturing moments meant to be sacred, microphones probing for reactions to every legal maneuver. Yet within this scrutiny, the family sought solace in rituals of remembrance. Candlelight vigils, personal mementos, and quiet reflection provided space for grief, memory, and connection. Friends and neighbors, whether personally acquainted with Emily or not, participated in communal acknowledgement of loss and the bittersweet satisfaction of truth emerging from years of uncertainty. The duality of closure and sorrow was palpable, each tribute a mixture of mourning and vindication, each act a subtle resistance against the erasure of a life once abruptly silenced. The trial revealed unsettling insights into the suspect's psyche. Behavioral experts detailed the meticulous strategies employed to evade detection, noting the ordinary routines that masked predatory intent. Weekly errands, casual social interactions, and habitual patterns were dissected for both meaning and misdirection. The ordinary became extraordinary in retrospect, an unsettling reminder that evil often resides beneath familiar surfaces. Psychological analyses emphasize duality, the coexistence of normalcy and malevolence, the hidden mechanisms by which trust can be manipulated, and the subtle exploitation of assumption. For the community, these revelations were a jolt, exposing vulnerabilities long ignored and reshaping collective perceptions of safety. News outlets amplified both relief and apprehension. Reporters crowded streets, broadcasting live updates, interviews, and commentary that reframed the town's understanding of itself. Headlines underscored shock and validation. Cold case solved after 15 years. DNA breakthrough reveals quiet predator. Santa Clarita confronts hidden horror. For residents, media coverage was a mirror reflecting both justice and collective trauma. Everyday interactions carried the weight of narrative. Conversations, shopping trips, and casual strolls were now measured against a backdrop of historical tension. Ordinary life had become a prism through which past terror refracted, blending nostalgia, fear, and reflection. Criminal psychologists provided context, dissecting the suspect's behavioral profile and the subtle cues that had previously gone unnoticed. They examined the strategies of concealment, the patient accumulation of knowledge about routines and vulnerabilities, and the ability to blend seamlessly into ordinary life. Experts highlighted how patterns of observation, minor deviations from expected behavior, and the careful exploitation of trust were characteristic of offenders who remain undetected for years. Their analyses offered insight, but no absolution. A chilling reminder that human perception is limited, that danger can dwell quietly within familiar spaces, and that vigilance is both necessary and unsettling. The broader implications of the case extended far beyond Santa Clarita. Cold case units across the country examined the integration of DNA analysis with traditional investigative methods. Lessons in evidence preservation, the reevaluation of witness statements, and a strategic application of new forensic technologies became key takeaways. Emily Vargas's case evolved into a procedural model, demonstrating how decades-old mysteries could be unraveled with patience, persistence, and scientific innovation. Law enforcement professionals cited the case as a beacon of both caution and possibility. The past is never inert, and truth, however delayed, has a way of resurfacing. Meanwhile, the town's residents confronted the lasting psychological impact. Neighborhoods, once perceived as benign, now carried an undertone of suspicion. Ordinary interactions were shadowed by reflection on prior events and the realization that danger had once existed unnoticed. Parents recalibrated protective measures for their children. Educators discussed safety and awareness in schools. Youth exchanged stories and memories reframed in light of revelation. The collective consciousness of Santa Clarita had shifted irreversibly, blending relief at justice with heightened vigilance, a delicate equilibrium of recovery and lingering uncertainty. Emily's family engaged in advocacy, transforming grief into action. They partnered with organizations supporting cold case investigations, evidence preservation, and victim services. Public speaking, community education, and participation in media features became avenues for channeling sorrow into purpose. Each event, each engagement, was both a tribute and a declaration. That Emily's life mattered, that justice could emerge from years of silence, and that vigilance and advocacy were essential in confronting the invisible dangers that had long haunted their community. Even as the legal system moved toward conclusion, the precise circumstances of Emily's final hours remained partially obscured. Investigators reconstructed timelines, analyzed interactions, and examined the suspect's routines, yet the lived experience of the victim, the fear, confusion, and helplessness, remained beyond reach. This void created a duality in perception, closure achieved through evidence, yet emotional and experiential understanding forever incomplete. The community's awareness of this gap deepened the haunting resonance of the case, a reminder that even when justice prevails, human experience retains elements of mystery and loss that cannot be restored. Local media chronicled this duality, juxtaposing the triumph of resolution with the ongoing shadow of memory. Features emphasized the painstaking work of law enforcement, the evolution of forensic technology, and the subtle, often invisible, ways danger can infiltrate ordinary life. Podcasts, documentaries, and written narratives explored both procedural and human elements, underscoring how persistence, science, and awareness converge to illuminate truth. Emily Vargas's story transcended local tragedy, becoming an exemplar of the complexities inherent in solving cold cases and the enduring emotional impact on affected communities. Behavioral analysts highlighted the psychological mechanisms that allowed the suspect to remain undetected for years. Ordinary behaviors, seemingly mundane and harmless, were scrutinized for subtle deviations indicative of concealed intent. Small choices, minor habits, and calculated patterns were revealed as deliberate components of evasion. These analyses provided insight for law enforcement, scholars, and the public, underscoring the unsettling notion that appearances can deceive and that ordinary routines can mask extraordinary malevolence. For residents, these revelations prompted both reflection and vigilance, a recalibration of perception that blended caution with relief. Community response continued to evolve, balancing commemoration with practical measures. Schools incorporated discussions of safety and awareness, emphasizing critical thinking, intuition, and precaution. Neighborhood organizations implemented programs for monitoring and reporting suspicious activity, fostering communal vigilance. Residents shared stories of memories once dismissed as insignificant but now understood in context, building a collective narrative that reinforced both caution and resilience. Emily Vargas's absence, once a symbol of unresolved tragedy, became a catalyst for education, awareness, and communal solidarity. Even as the trial concluded and the suspect faced sentencing, the psychological impact persisted. Streets, parks, and local establishments carried echoes of past events. The diner where Emily had worked remained a site of remembrance, where patrons left flowers, candles, and notes. Residents internalized lessons of vigilance and awareness, navigating the ordinary with an enhanced sensitivity to the extraordinary. The town had been irrevocably transformed by the events of 1998 and the revelations of the subsequent investigation, a place simultaneously familiar and altered, where memory, justice, and ongoing vigilance coexisted in complex tension. Emily Vargas's story, resolved in forensic and legal terms, retained its haunting presence. DNA evidence had illuminated truth, yet the human and emotional dimensions of her experience remained beyond reconstruction. The community, while reassured by justice, continued to grapple with the long shadow of fear, memory, and collective trauma. Each night, quiet streets, flickering streetlights, and familiar corners echoed the resonance of events past, serving as subtle reminders of vulnerability, vigilance, and the enduring presence of the unresolved within the resolved. Even as legal proceedings moved toward closure, Santa Clarita remained a town suspended between relief and lingering unease. The air carried the weight of Emily Vargas's absence and the shock of her case's resolution. a combination that reshaped perception, memory, and daily life. Ordinary streets, once traversed without thought, were now interpreted through the lens of vigilance. Parents scrutinized neighborhood activity, teens replayed moments and interactions with new suspicion, and neighbors reflected on subtle irregularities that had once seemed insignificant. The DNA breakthrough, while monumental, had not erased the shadow of the past. It had only illuminated it. Detectives remained engaged, retracing every potential step of the suspect's actions, mapping out the landscape of Emily's final night with relentless precision. The mundane details of daily life, a route to the diner, a short walk to a friend's house, a detour through a quiet alley, were re-examined and contextualized within a framework of evidence previously unattainable. Microtraces, fibers, and microscopic residues were now seen not as incidental, but as vital pieces of a complex puzzle. Analysts worked long hours, overlaying historical data with new technology, creating a narrative of movement, presence, and intent. Each finding reinforced the truth while magnifying the chilling realization of how close danger had come to hiding in plain sight. Emily's family navigated the ongoing emotional terrain with a mixture of grief, relief, and determination. Media attention was relentless. Cameras followed them from home to courthouse, from interviews to memorial events. Yet within this scrutiny, the family cultivated spaces of remembrance and reflection. Candles flickered on altars of memory. Photographs and personal artifacts offered tangible connections to a daughter lost too soon, and quiet gatherings with friends and neighbors fostered community mourning. These rituals were both solace and defiance, a means of reclaiming narrative and asserting presence in a world that had, for years, been defined by absence. The courtroom was a crucible of tension and revelation. DNA evidence, meticulously analyzed and presented, transformed previously vague suspicion into undeniable certainty. Witnesses recounted fragmented memories that, when pieced together, formed a coherent timeline. Each testimony, each sequence of evidence, tightened the narrative around the suspect, reducing ambiguity, amplifying accountability. Observers, family, friends, law enforcement, journalists absorbed the gravity of decades-long investigation crystallized into a single, undeniable truth. The courtroom became more than a venue for justice. It was a theater of emotional and psychological intensity, where years of unresolved tension found expression and closure edged into public consciousness. Santa Clarita itself became a participant in this unfolding drama. The town's collective memory was reshaped, blending the ordinary with the extraordinary. Streets, parks, and commercial spaces were imbued with heightened awareness. Ordinary interactions, greetings with neighbors, casual exchanges in shops, school commutes, were now colored by the knowledge that danger could exist behind the facade of normalcy. Community meetings addressed the psychological impact, schools emphasized situational awareness, and residents became both observers and participants in the ongoing reconstruction of trust. The city, once complacent in its routine, now carried a heightened sensitivity to the unseen, a tension between comfort and caution. Behavioral analysts provided crucial insight into the suspect's duality, the simultaneous ordinariness and malevolence that allowed him to evade detection for so long. Routine behaviors, weekend errands, casual social gestures, seemingly benign habits, were recast as strategies of concealment. Analysts emphasized the subtle manipulation of trust, the patient accumulation of knowledge about community routines, and the deliberate avoidance of patterns that could trigger suspicion. These revelations illuminated broader truths about human behavior, the complexity of perception, and the challenges inherent in detecting malevolence hidden within ordinary life. Media coverage amplified the duality of resolution and trauma. Journalists chronicled courtroom proceedings, expert analyses, and community reactions, framing the story as both cautionary tale and testament to the power of persistence and science. Headlines underscored the shock of revelation. Cold case solved, DNA unmasks quiet predator. Santa Clarita confronts hidden evil. Justice after 15 years. Emily Vargas case closed. The narrative extended beyond the local, capturing attention nationally and fostering dialogue about the intersection of human behavior, forensic science, and the emotional weight of unresolved crime. The impact on the community's youth was pronounced. Schools organized assemblies and workshops to discuss safety, critical thinking, and vigilance. Students revisited personal memories of Emily and contextualized fleeting experiences that, at the time, seemed inconsequential but now assumed ominous significance. Parents reinforced lessons in observation, intuition, and cautious engagement. The town collectively recalibrated its awareness, integrating lessons of vigilance with the natural rhythms of adolescence and family life. The case became both an educational tool and a cautionary tale, shaping behavior and consciousness in subtle but enduring ways. Law enforcement agencies beyond Santa Clarita scrutinized the case closely. Cold case units, forensic specialists, and investigative teams nationwide examined the methodology, highlighting the integration of DNA analysis, historical evidence, and persistent detective work. Emily Vargas's story became emblematic of the potential to resolve long-standing mysteries when technology, diligence, and human insight intersect. Protocols for evidence preservation, witness follow-up, and cross-referencing historical data were refined, informed by lessons derived from this singular case. What had begun as a local tragedy became a template for investigative excellence, influencing practice and policy across jurisdictions. Despite the forensic resolution, certain questions remained unanswerable. The lived experience of Emily Vargas during her final hours, the fear, disorientation, and terror, remained beyond reconstruction. Investigators could establish presence, sequence events, and confirm accountability, but the human dimension, the subjective reality of the victim, remained inaccessible. This gap reinforced a paradox. The legal and scientific truth could be established, yet the emotional, experiential truth remained elusive. The town, while relieved by justice, absorbed this ambiguity, understanding that closure in evidence does not fully erase the psychological and emotional resonance of trauma. Emily's family channeled grief into advocacy. Collaborating with organizations supporting unresolved cases, they promoted awareness, procedural reform, and victim services. Public speaking engagements, interviews, and participation in media narratives allowed the family to reclaim agency over a story that had long defined them externally. Each engagement served multiple purposes, honoring Emily's life, reinforcing the significance of justice, and fostering proactive measures to prevent similar tragedies. Their personal narrative became intertwined with broader societal lessons, illustrating how individual grief can catalyze communal understanding and policy change. Neighborhoods reflected on the quiet duality of ordinary life and hidden threat. Residents reconsidered interactions with familiar neighbors, scrutinized routine encounters, and assessed environmental cues previously overlooked. Small anomalies, cars parked irregularly, shadows in the periphery, unaccounted for movements, were retrospectively understood as fragments of a narrative once invisible. Collective memory reshaped ordinary experiences, blending vigilance with a human need for normalcy, and reinforcing the delicate balance between awareness and paranoia. Even after the suspect's conviction, the emotional reverberations persisted. Streets and parks carried memories. Familiar places became symbolic, and the diner where Emily worked remained a site of tribute. Candles, flowers, and handwritten notes served as persistent markers of remembrance. Residents adapted to an altered reality, balancing renewed safety with residual awareness of vulnerability. The town's identity had been irrevocably transformed. Ordinary life now coexisted with the indelible memory of trauma and the triumph of eventual justice. Emily Vargas's narrative, while resolved legally, retained a haunting resonance. DNA had illuminated fact, yet the emotional and experiential dimensions remained intangible. The community's consciousness had shifted, integrating lessons of vigilance, human complexity, and the fragility of assumed safety. Even as normal routines resumed, subtle reminders, shadows, silent streets, flickering streetlights, continued to evoke reflection, a silent acknowledgement of the extraordinary events hidden within ordinary life. Santa Clarita had survived revelation, but it had been irrevocably changed, its collective psyche permanently shaped by memory, justice, and the ever-present awareness of unseen danger. Even months after the courtroom verdict, Santa Clarita was a town still breathing in the aftershocks of Emily Vargas's case. The DNA breakthrough had brought a resolution to a 15-year-old mystery, but the emotional and psychological reverberations persisted. Residents moved through familiar streets with a new awareness, the ordinary landscape overlaid with memories of absence and revelation. Each lamppost, each sidewalk, each quiet alley was a marker of both history and vigilance, a place where normal life intersected with the extraordinary and the unseen. Parents instructed their children with renewed urgency. Teens revisited fleeting memories, recalling glimpses and interactions now recontextualized through the lens of revelation. The town had learned that safety is provisional, trust is fragile, and even ordinary life can conceal darkness. Law enforcement continued to dissect every detail of the case. Analysts revisited microevidence, re-examining fibers, hair samples, and environmental traces with technology far more advanced than what had existed in 1998. Each sequence, each forensic pattern, revealed nuances previously invisible, allowing investigators to reconstruct not just a timeline, but the movements, behaviors, and likely intentions of the suspect. Days blurred into nights in sterile labs, monitors flickering with sequences of letters and numbers that, to the untrained eye, seemed abstract, but to detectives, each represented a key turning point in the reconstruction of Emily Vargas's final hours. The meticulous work was exhausting but electrifying, bridging decades of uncertainty with newfound clarity. Emily's family lived in a dual reality: the relief of justice achieved, and the relentless weight of grief for a life interrupted. Public attention was constant, cameras following them from court appearances to memorials, journalists probing for statements that captured both pain and perspective. Yet amidst the scrutiny, the family maintained spaces of private remembrance. Photographs, letters, and small personal artifacts became touchstones for memory, tangible anchors in a world that had long been defined by absence. Candlelight vigils were spontaneous yet sacred, a mixture of communal mourning and intimate reflection. Each act of remembrance was both homage and assertion, reclaiming narrative agency in a story that had long been shaped by circumstance and crime. The courtroom had revealed unsettling truths about the suspect's psychology. Behavioral experts dissected the duality of ordinary life and concealed malevolence. Daily routines, social interactions, and habitual behaviors all had served as camouflage, allowing the suspect to move unnoticed while cultivating knowledge of community rhythms and vulnerabilities. Analysts emphasized the subtle strategies of manipulation, the patient observation, and the calculated avoidance of scrutiny that characterized a perpetrator who had remained invisible for decades. For Santa Clarita residents, these revelations challenged assumptions about normalcy, safety, and the deceptively simple nature of human behavior. Ordinary life had masked extraordinary danger, and the town's collective consciousness now carried that uneasy awareness. Media coverage amplified both relief and lingering apprehension. News crews documented courtroom proceedings, interviews with experts, and community responses, framing Emily Vargas's story as a blend of cautionary tale and triumph of persistence. Headlines highlighted shock and resolution. Cold case solved. DNA breakthrough exposes hidden threat. Santa Clarita confronts years of concealed danger. Justice emerges after 15 years of mystery. For residents, media coverage served as both validation and amplification, reinforcing the dual reality of closure and ongoing awareness. Ordinary interactions, from shopping trips to casual neighborhood strolls, carried the subtle tension of knowing that past danger had lived alongside them undetected. The town's youth faced a profound recalibration of perception. Schools conducted workshops emphasizing situational awareness, critical thinking, and the importance of observation. Students revisited memories of Emily, connecting past interactions and minor anomalies to a broader understanding of vigilance. Parents and educators collaborated to foster awareness without inciting paranoia, guiding young people through lessons in safety and perception. The community collectively integrated these insights, reshaping daily life with a nuanced balance of caution, empathy, and resilience. Emily Vargas's case became an enduring educational tool, a real-world example of both the consequences of inattention and the potential for resolution when vigilance and science converge. Law enforcement agencies nationwide examined the case as a model for solving cold cases. Techniques integrating DNA analysis with traditional investigative methods were studied. Protocols for evidence preservation were refined, and approaches to witness engagement were updated based on lessons learned. Emily Vargas's story emerged as a procedural benchmark, illustrating the convergence of scientific advancement, meticulous documentation, and human perseverance in illuminating truths long obscured. The case reinforced the notion that no investigation is ever truly concluded until every potential lead has been exhaustively pursued, a reminder that persistence is as vital as technology in the pursuit of justice. Despite the forensic and legal resolution, certain dimensions of the tragedy remained unknowable. The lived experience of Emily Vargas, the fear, confusion, and helplessness, was beyond reconstruction. Investigators could map sequences, identify locations, and confirm responsibility, yet the emotional and psychological reality of the victim remained inaccessible. This gap underscored a paradox. Justice achieved in evidence does not fully restore what was lost in experience. The community absorbed this ambiguity, understanding that closure in legal terms cannot entirely resolve the emotional and existential impact of loss. Emily's family channeled grief into advocacy and outreach. They collaborated with organizations dedicated to supporting victims' families, advancing procedural reform, and promoting awareness of cold case resolution. Public appearances, interviews, and educational initiatives allowed them to reclaim narrative agency, transforming tragedy into a source of communal instruction. Each engagement honored Emily's life, reinforced the significance of justice, and provided opportunities for the broader community to reflect on vigilance, safety, and the hidden complexity of human behavior. Their personal story became intertwined with public education, advocacy, and procedural evolution. Neighbors reflected on the duality of ordinary life and concealed threat. Small, previously unnoticed details, cars parked irregularly, fleeting shadows, minor irregularities in behavior, were retrospectively understood as early signals. Collective memory reshaped the interpretation of ordinary events, blending vigilance with the human desire for normalcy. The community grappled with the realization that danger often operates quietly, patiently, and invisibly, and that ordinary familiarity can mask extraordinary threat. This understanding reshaped social interactions, neighborhood dynamics, and communal consciousness, creating a heightened awareness that endured long after the trial's conclusion. Even after sentencing, the town continued to navigate the psychological ramifications. Streets, parks, and local establishments remained symbols of both trauma and resolution. The diner where Emily had worked became a site of tribute, with patrons leaving flowers, candles, and notes, while everyday life resumed amidst lingering awareness of vulnerability. Santa Clarita had survived revelation, but it had been irrevocably transformed. The town's identity now carried a dual narrative, one of ordinary life restored and one of extraordinary memory preserved. Residents moved forward with a cautious optimism, cognizant of past danger, yet empowered by the demonstration of truth and justice prevailing. Emily Vardis's story, resolved in forensic and legal terms, retained its haunting presence. DNA had illuminated factual truth, yet the emotional and experiential dimensions remained inaccessible. The town's consciousness had been reshaped, integrating lessons of vigilance, human complexity, and the fragility of assumed safety. Even as routines returned to familiarity, subtle reminders, the flicker of streetlights, the quiet of once bustling alleys, shadows in the periphery, continued to evoke reflection. Santa Clarita's collective psyche had been altered. It carried both the scars of trauma and the affirmation that perseverance, technology, and human determination could uncover hidden truths. Even as the legal verdict settled into the public record, Santa Clarita remained haunted by the reverberations of Emily Vardis's disappearance. A quiet city now forever aware of the extraordinary darkness that had once lurked in familiar streets. Neighborhoods once assumed safe became sites of reflection. Each corner, lamppost, and park bench a silent reminder of what had been lost and what had finally been revealed. Parents watched with vigilance, guiding children along sidewalks, through alleys, and past intersections, imparting lessons born of both instinct and learned experience. Teens recalled minor oddities, brief glances, misplaced items, fleeting shadows, that at the time seemed inconsequential but now formed a chilling mosaic of premonition. The town's collective consciousness had shifted, tempered by grief, vigilance, and the undeniable knowledge of what had gone unseen for 15 years. Law enforcement, though satisfied by the successful resolution, remained meticulous. Investigators retraced every step of Emily's final movements, examining the suspect's routines, known locations, and interactions with painstaking attention to detail. Forensic teams revisited old evidence with modern technology. Microscopic fibers, hair samples, partial fingerprints, and trace materials that had once yielded little now illuminated patterns of behavior and concealment. Each new analysis confirmed the timeline, validated witness accounts, and exposed layers of intent previously obscured. Days and nights blended in labs, monitors flickering with sequences that to an outsider might appear cryptic, but to detectives represented the intricate web of truth emerging from decades of silence. Emily's family continued to navigate the fraught intersection of public scrutiny and private grief. Cameras followed them from courthouse to memorial, reporters probing for words that could encapsulate pain, relief, and perspective simultaneously. Within this attention, however, the family cultivated spaces of reflection. Candles burned steadily beside photographs, letters, and cherished artifacts, creating a sanctuary in which memory coexisted with mourning. Spontaneous vigils appeared across neighborhoods, an amalgamation of personal tribute and communal acknowledgement. Each act was both a celebration of life and a declaration. Emily had existed, her story mattered, and the truth, though delayed, had finally emerged. The courtroom had revealed uncomfortable truths about human duality. Behavioral experts dissected the juxtaposition of the suspect's ordinariness and concealed malevolence. Weekday errands, casual greetings, habitual behaviors, once reassuring, were reframed as strategies for concealment. Experts highlighted the patient observation, manipulation of trust, and careful avoidance of attention that allowed the perpetrator to remain hidden for decades. Santa Clarita residents absorbed the unsettling lesson. Appearances are often deceptive, familiarity can be illusory, and ordinary life can mask extraordinary danger. The revelation of hidden threat within the mundane reframed daily existence, leaving the town in a state of cautious introspection. Media coverage amplified both the catharsis of resolution and the lingering discomfort of knowledge. Journalists documented courtroom testimony, expert analyses, and public reaction, framing the narrative as a cautionary tale and a triumph of persistence. Headlines emphasized shock, accountability, and the extraordinary nature of closure. Cold case solved. DNA breakthrough exposes hidden evil. Santa Clarita confronts decades-old threat. Justice emerges after 15 years of silence. Residents watched and listened, absorbing the narrative while simultaneously reflecting on their own memories, interactions, and assumptions. The story became a mirror through which the community examined itself, balancing relief with heightened awareness. The town's youth were particularly affected, their understanding of normalcy and vigilance forever altered. Schools hosted workshops emphasizing critical thinking, observation, and safety practices. Students revisited personal memories of Emily, identifying overlooked anomalies and interactions that now took on a new significance. Parents reinforced guidance on intuition and environmental awareness, blending caution with normal adolescent experience. This recalibration of perception became a subtle yet enduring feature of community life, an intersection of education, memory, and collective caution informed by tragedy and resolution alike. Law enforcement agencies nationwide examined the case as a template for solving cold cases. Techniques integrating DNA evidence with traditional investigative methods were scrutinized, protocols for evidence preservation refined, and methods of witness engagement updated based on the lessons of Emily Vargas's case. It became emblematic of the convergence of technology, human persistence, and meticulous investigation, a model demonstrating that no case is ever truly unsolved until every potential lead has been rigorously pursued. The narrative extended beyond local tragedy, shaping policy, training, and investigative culture across jurisdictions. Yet despite forensic resolution, certain dimensions remained unknowable. The lived experience of Emily Vargas during her final hours, the fear, disorientation, and helplessness, was beyond reconstruction. Investigators could reconstruct sequences, identify locations, and confirm accountability, but the emotional and subjective reality of the victim remained inaccessible. This paradox underscored the limits of resolution. While evidence can illuminate fact, it cannot restore the lost experience. The town absorbed this ambiguity, integrating closure in law with the persistent shadow of what could never be fully known. Emily's family converted grief into purpose. Through advocacy, education, and outreach, they highlighted the importance of cold case resolution, procedural innovation, and victim support. Public appearances, interviews, and community engagements allowed the family to reclaim narrative agency, shaping discourse and policy while honoring Emily's life. Each engagement was simultaneously tribute, instruction, and reminder. Vigilance, persistence, and truth matter, and every act of remembrance reinforces both memory and communal responsibility. Neighbors reflected on the duality of ordinary life and concealed threat. Minor details, cars parked irregularly, fleeting shadows, subtle behavioral deviations, were reinterpreted in light of revelation. Collective memory reframed ordinary experiences, blending heightened awareness with a human need for normalcy. The community understood, implicitly, that danger often operates quietly, patiently, and invisibly, and that familiarity is no safeguard. This consciousness reshaped social interactions, neighborhood dynamics, and collective vigilance, creating a sustained awareness that extended beyond legal resolution. Even after sentencing, the emotional reverberations endured. Streets, parks, and commercial spaces became symbolic touchstones of trauma and memory. The diner where Emily worked remained a site of tribute, where patrons left candles, flowers, and notes. Life resumed, yet subtle reminders of past danger persisted in flickering streetlights, quiet intersections, and shadows at dusk. Santa Clarita had survived revelation, but the town's identity had irrevocably shifted. Ordinary life persisted, yet memory, vigilance, and the knowledge of hidden threat had become permanent companions. Emily Vargas's narrative, while legally resolved, retained haunting resonance. DNA had confirmed fact, yet the emotional and experiential dimensions remained intangible. The town's collective consciousness had been transformed, integrating lessons of vigilance, human complexity, and the fragility of assumed safety. Even as daily routines regained semblance of normalcy, subtle reminders, shadows, quiet streets, empty parks, evoked reflection, ensuring that the past continued to inform perception. Santa Clarita moved forward, yet remained acutely aware of the delicate balance between ordinary life and the extraordinary realities that sometimes lie hidden beneath it. For law enforcement, the case remained a living study. Cold case units continued to review methods and outcomes, refining protocols for future investigations. Training programs incorporated lessons from Emily Vargas's case, emphasizing the integration of advanced forensic technology, meticulous documentation, and patient investigation. Analysts explored patterns of human behavior that enabled concealment, studying the duality of ordinary appearance and concealed intent. Each investigation that followed bore traces of this precedent, extending the impact of a single case far beyond local borders, reinforcing the notion that persistence and innovation can overcome the passage of time. Community memory became a delicate dance between remembrance and resilience. Rituals of tribute, memorials, and shared reflection coexisted with efforts to reclaim ordinary life. Residents moved through streets that had once been silent witnesses to fear, now navigating them with awareness, reverence, and cautious optimism. Conversations incorporated lessons learned, blending narratives of personal experience with communal vigilance. The town, forever altered, balanced recovery with the persistent resonance of past events, creating a collective identity both scarred and strengthened by experience, memory, and the pursuit of justice. Even as the courthouse emptied after final verdicts, Santa Clarita remained suspended in a strange limbo, a city caught between relief and the lingering echo of Emily Vargas's disappearance. Streets familiar for years were now measured differently, each alley, lamppost, and intersection loaded with the memory of absence. Parents guided children with careful eyes, pointing out routes once taken without thought. Teens revisited fleeting encounters, recalling moments that had seemed inconsequential, now terrifying in hindsight. The revelation of truth did not erase the past. It reframed it, embedding vigilance into the fabric of everyday life. Ordinary places had become extraordinary in memory, each one a witness to events that had unfolded unseen. Law enforcement continued to work tirelessly, retracing the suspect's movements and reconstructing the chronology of Emily's final hours. Evidence that had sat dormant for years, fibers, hair, environmental residues, was re-examined with cutting-edge technology. Each fragment, once overlooked, now spoke volumes. Patterns of movement, repeated behaviors, and micro-interactions emerged from the shadows, providing a mosaic of intent and concealment. Detectives labored for hours, eyes fixed on screens, displaying sequences that appeared abstract, but were in reality the fingerprints of truth. Every discovery deepened understanding, illuminated gaps in perception, and reminded both investigators and the community of the delicate boundary between normalcy and danger. Emily's family navigated a paradox of emotions: satisfaction that justice had been served, tempered by the persistent ache of loss. Public attention remained intense, cameras tracking every gesture, microphones probing for statements of grief and triumph alike. Within these pressures, the family cultivated private spaces for remembrance. Candles burned beside photographs and letters, artifacts of memory forming a sanctuary where grief and reflection intertwined. Community vigils appeared spontaneously, a collective acknowledgement of loss and survival, of mourning and resilience. These moments were simultaneously intimate and public, serving as tributes to Emily's life and a reminder of the enduring presence of her story within the town. The courtroom had revealed disturbing insights into the suspect's duality. Behavioral analysts detailed how ordinary routines, errands, social gestures, habitual behaviors had concealed malevolent intent. Patient observation, subtle manipulation, and calculated avoidance of scrutiny had allowed the perpetrator to evade detection for decades. Santa Clarita residents absorbed the chilling lesson. Familiarity can deceive, trust can be manipulated, and the mundane may mask extraordinary danger. The revelation reshaped the collective psyche, leaving the community acutely aware that the world is often more complex and threatening than it appears. Media coverage amplified both relief and the persistent unease of awareness. Journalists chronicled courtroom testimony, forensic revelations, and community reactions, framing Emily Vargas's story as both a cautionary tale and a testament to perseverance. Headlines emphasized shock, resolution, and vigilance. Cold case solved. DNA unmasks hidden threat. Santa Clarita confronts long-hidden danger. 15 years later, justice revealed. Residents absorbed these narratives while simultaneously reflecting on their own lives, interactions, and assumptions. Daily activities, shopping, commuting, walking the dog, were now imbued with heightened awareness, ordinary routines refracted through the prism of revelation. The town's youth experienced profound shifts in perception. Schools incorporated workshops on situational awareness, critical thinking, and personal safety. Students revisited memories of Emily, interpreting minor encounters and irregularities with new insight. Parents guided them in balancing caution with normal adolescent experiences. The community collectively recalibrated, integrating lessons of vigilance and awareness without succumbing to fear, blending education, memory, and resilience. Emily Vargas's story became an enduring lesson, a real-world demonstration of the intersection between observation, preparedness, and justice. Law enforcement agencies across the nation scrutinized the case as a model for cold case resolution. The integration of DNA evidence with traditional investigative methods, combined with meticulous record-keeping and patient re-examination of old leads, provided a procedural blueprint. Protocols for preserving evidence, revisiting witness statements, and leveraging technological advancements were updated based on the Vargas case. It became emblematic of the convergence of innovation, persistence, and analytical rigor. The narrative extended beyond local tragedy, informing national practice and reinforcing the principle that no case is ever truly closed until every potential avenue has been explored. Despite the resolution, certain truths remained unknowable. The lived experience of Emily Vargas during her final hours, the terror, confusion, and helplessness, could not be reconstructed. Investigators could confirm movement, intent, and responsibility, but the emotional reality remained beyond reach. This gap underscored the limits of closure. Legal and forensic resolution could establish fact, yet emotional and experiential understanding remained incomplete. Santa Clarita residents absorbed this ambiguity, integrating the satisfaction of justice with the persistent awareness that some aspects of tragedy are irretrievable. Emily's family transformed grief into purpose. Advocacy, public engagement, and education became mechanisms for honoring Emily's life while contributing to broader societal understanding. They collaborated with organizations supporting cold case investigations, procedural reform, and victim services. Public appearances, interviews, and community events allowed them to reclaim narrative agency, influencing policy and consciousness while preserving memory. Each engagement served multiple functions: tribute, instruction, and reinforcement of the importance of vigilance, persistence, and justice. Their personal story became intertwined with communal and national efforts to prevent similar tragedies and illuminate hidden truths. Neighbors reflected on the delicate duality of ordinary life and concealed threat. Small anomalies, cars left out of place, fleeting shadows, subtle behavioral deviations, were reinterpreted with hindsight. Collective memory reframed the ordinary, blending awareness with the natural rhythms of life. The community recognized that danger often operates quietly, invisibly, and patiently, and that familiarity is no guarantee of safety. This consciousness reshaped social interaction, neighborhood vigilance, and communal dynamics, creating a sustained culture of awareness that persisted even after the legal process concluded. Even after sentencing, emotional reverberations endured. Streets, parks, and commercial spaces became symbolic of both trauma and remembrance. The diner where Emily had worked remained a site of tribute, where patrons left candles, flowers, and notes. Life resumed its rhythm, yet the town moved with a subtle tension, aware of the fragility of safety. Santa Clarita had survived revelation, but its identity had shifted irreversibly. Ordinary life existed alongside the memory of trauma. Vigilance intertwined with routine, and the knowledge of past danger coexisted with the certainty of justice achieved. Emily Vargas's story, legally resolved, retained haunting resonance. DNA had illuminated the factual narrative, yet the emotional and experiential dimensions remained inaccessible. The town's collective consciousness had transformed, integrating lessons of vigilance, human complexity, and the fragility of assumed safety. Even as routines normalized, subtle reminders, the flicker of streetlights, quiet intersections, shadows at dusk, evoked reflection. Santa Clarita moved forward, yet remained acutely aware of the delicate balance between ordinary life and the extraordinary realities that had once been hidden beneath it. Law enforcement continued to study and refine protocols based on the Vargas case. Cold case units integrated lessons into training programs, emphasizing the convergence of technology, meticulous documentation, and patient investigation. Behavioral analysts explored patterns of concealment, duality of appearance, and human strategies of evasion. Each subsequent investigation bore the imprint of this precedent, illustrating the enduring influence of a single case on professional practice. Persistence, technological application, and analytical rigor proved to be as critical as the passage of time itself, reinforcing the potential for even decades-old mysteries to be resolved. Community memory evolved into a nuanced blend of reflection and resilience. Tributes, memorials, and rituals coexisted with efforts to reclaim everyday life. Streets, parks, and homes became spaces where remembrance and vigilance intertwined. Residents navigated their environment with heightened awareness while maintaining personal and social continuity. Santa Clarita's identity was irreversibly shaped, balancing trauma with recovery, ordinary life with extraordinary memory, and vigilance with the affirmation that justice, though delayed, had finally emerged. Even as months passed since the courtroom's final gavel, Santa Clarita existed in a peculiar tension, a city simultaneously relieved and acutely aware of the extraordinary darkness that had once roamed its streets unseen. Familiar sidewalks, parks, and alleys carried weight, as if the air itself remembered Emily Vargas's absence. Parents guided children with heightened attention, pointing out routes that were once assumed safe. Teenagers revisited fleeting moments, recalling encounters, glances, or misplaced items that now resonated with eerie significance. Ordinary spaces have been transformed by knowledge, layered with the shadow of past danger and the relief of revelation. The DNA breakthrough had illuminated truth, but had not erased memory, leaving vigilance permanently entwined with daily life. Law enforcement continued to immerse themselves in the intricate details of the investigation. Every aspect of a suspect's behavior, from routine errands to social interactions, was revisited. Forensic analysts examined previously collected fibers, hair samples, and environmental traces with advanced methods unavailable in 1998. Each fragment, once inert, now contributed to a precise reconstruction of Emily's final hours. Investigators meticulously mapped patterns of movement, micro-interactions, and sequences of behavior, revealing the suspect's careful orchestration of concealment. The work was painstaking yet electrifying, each insight a revelation bridging decades of uncertainty. Monitors flickered with sequences of letters, numbers, and images that, to outsiders, seemed abstract, but to detectives represented the architecture of truth finally coming into focus. Emily's family continued to navigate the paradoxical space between relief and grief. Public scrutiny remained constant, with cameras and microphones documenting every appearance, every statement, every subtle gesture. Yet within this attention, the family carved private spaces for reflection and remembrance. Candles burned beside photographs, letters, and personal mementos, creating sanctuaries where grief and memory coexisted. Community vigils appeared spontaneously across neighborhoods, uniting families, friends, and neighbors in collective acknowledgement of loss and resilience. Each tribute, whether intimate or public, reinforced the enduring presence of Emily's story, a reminder that justice had been achieved, but memory would forever persist. The courtroom had exposed unsettling dimensions of the suspect's duality. Behavioral analysts dissected how ordinary routines, grocery runs, social greetings, habitual behaviors had masked deliberate malevolence. The patient observation of victims, subtle manipulation of trust, and meticulous avoidance of scrutiny had allowed the perpetrator to remain undetected for decades. Santa Clarita residents absorbed a chilling lesson. Normalcy can be deceptive, safety is provisional, and the mundane may conceal extraordinary danger. Awareness of this duality reshaped the community's collective psyche, leaving a persistent sense of cautious reflection woven into the fabric of daily life. Media coverage heightened both relief and persistent unease. Journalists chronicled courtroom proceedings, forensic breakthroughs, and